I still remember how my hands trembled as I fixed my earrings. The engagement dinner was in 30 minutes. My fiancé Matteo squeezed my shoulders gently. Relax, Valentina. My family will love you. But I knew better. After 8 months of dating, I understood one thing clearly. Carmela Rivero, my future mother-in-law, had decided I wasn't good enough for her son. Not once had she smiled at me genuinely, not a single time. I smoothed my navy blue dress and checked my reflection. At 29 years old, I was a successful veterinary surgeon in Madrid. I spoke 3 languages fluently. I volunteered at animal shelters every weekend. Yet around Carmela, I felt like an awkward teenager. The restaurant Carmela selected was the most exclusive in Madrid. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, white tablecloths stretched across large round tables. A string quartet played softly in the corner. 24 people were already seated when we arrived. Matteo guided me toward the main table where his parents stood. Carmela wore an elegant black dress with pearls. Her perfectly styled silver hair framed sharp features. Her husband, Francisco, nodded politely at me. "You're late," Carmela said, checking her watch. "We were about to start without you." "Sorry, Mama. Traffic was terrible," Matteo explained, kissing her cheek. Carmela barely acknowledged his apology. Her eyes scanned my outfit critically. "That's an interesting color choice for an engagement dinner." "Thank you," I replied, pretending not to notice the disapproval. Then came the moment that would replay in my mind for months. Carmela gestured toward the seating arrangement. "Valentina, you'll be sitting at the end of the table. Family should be closer to the center." I froze. The end of the table was where distant acquaintances sat, not the future bride. I looked at Matteo, hoping he would say something. He simply whispered, "It's just seating. Don't make a scene." The humiliation burned through me as I walked to my assigned seat. I was placed between Matteo's distant cousin, whom I'd never met, and an elderly family friend who was hard of hearing. Matteo sat near the center with his parents, siblings, and aunts. Throughout dinner, I could barely eat. Whenever I tried to join conversations, Carmela would subtly interrupt or change the subject. When toasts were made, everyone was acknowledged except me. I counted 16 toasts in total. Not one mentioned my name. This wasn't the first time Carmela had made me feel invisible. 2 weeks earlier, she had organized a family lunch at her home. She had forgotten to set a place for me. I ended up sitting on a folding chair brought from the garage. During Christmas, she had distributed personalized gifts to every family member. When it came to me, she simply said, "I didn't know what you would like." I received a generic gift card while everyone else opened thoughtful presents. The pattern was becoming clearer with each interaction. This wasn't just occasional rudeness. This was systematic exclusion. The table had become the physical manifestation of where I stood in the family hierarchy, always at the margins, never at the center. After the engagement dinner, things only got worse. Carmela began forgetting to invite me to family gatherings. Matteo would receive calls. "Oh, I assumed Valentina would be busy with work. She's always so dedicated to her career." When we announced our wedding date, Carmela immediately objected. "That's when the Alonso family always has their annual party. How could you not consider that?" The Alonsos were distant family friends I had never even met. Their party could hardly outweigh our wedding. Yet Matteo actually considered changing our date. "Maybe we should be flexible," he suggested. 3 months before the wedding, Carmela invited me to lunch. Just the 2 of us. For a brief moment, I thought she was extending an olive branch. I spent hours choosing the perfect outfit. I even brought her a handmade gift. We sat at a restaurant she had selected. Within 5 minutes, she revealed her true purpose. I've gathered some suggestions for the wedding. I've made a list of changes you should consider. Her list was actually a bound folder, 12 pages long with color-coded tabs. Everything from my dress choice to the menu was criticized. These centerpieces you've selected are quite provincial, and your color scheme is rather unsophisticated. I tried to respond diplomatically. Thank you for your input, Carmela. Matteo and I have already finalized most decisions. Her smile tightened. Valentina, dear, this wedding reflects on our entire family, not just you. The Riveros have a certain standing in society. When I gently held my ground, her tone shifted. Matteo has always been easily influenced, first by that Boleyn girl in university, now by you. He goes along with whatever his partner wants. It was the first I'd heard of Boleyn. Later, I discovered she was the daughter of Carmela's best friend, the girl Carmela had always hoped Matteo would marry, the perfect daughter-in-law she had selected. 2 weeks later came the final straw. Matteo and I hosted a dinner at our apartment for both families to meet. My parents traveled 6 hours from Valencia to attend. I spent 3 days cleaning and cooking traditional dishes from both families. Carmela arrived 45 minutes late with Francisco. She barely greeted my parents. When she saw the table I had carefully arranged, she immediately began rearranging everything. The napkins should be folded this way, and these glasses are for white wine, not red. During dinner, she dominated every conversation. When my mother tried to share stories about my childhood, Carmela interrupted. That reminds me of when Matteo won the national math competition. Did he tell you about that, Senor and Senora Ortiz? After dessert, I went to the kitchen to make coffee. I overheard Carmela speaking to my parents. Valentina is still developing as a hostess. With time, perhaps she'll learn. Matteo has always been attracted to projects. Projects? She had called me a project, as if I were something broken Matteo was trying to fix. My mother later told me she had been speechless at the rudeness. My father had wanted to leave immediately. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone at the dining table. The same table where Carmela had rearranged everything to her liking. I stared at the empty chairs, still arranged according to her preferences, not mine. Something broke inside me. 8 months of swallowing humiliation. 8 months of Matteo saying, "That's just how she is." 8 months of being placed at the end of every table, literally and figuratively. I pulled out my phone and began researching. Articles about controlling mothers-in-law, forums where others shared similar experiences, books about setting boundaries with difficult family members. "No more," I whispered to the empty room. "I will not be seated at the end of the table for the rest of my life." The next morning, I woke up with newfound clarity. I turned to Matteo as he prepared for work. "We need to talk about your mother, and about us." The morning after our disastrous family dinner, I waited for Matteo at our kitchen table, the same table where his mother had rearranged everything without permission. I had returned it to my original arrangement, a small act of reclamation. "Your mother called me a project to my parents' faces," I said when Matteo entered. "This can't continue. I won't be treated this way anymore." Matteo looked uncomfortable. He loosened his tie and sat across from me. "Valentina, you're overreacting. Mama just has strong opinions about everything." "Strong opinions don't excuse cruel behavior," I replied. "I've tried for 8 months. I've been polite. I've been accommodating. Nothing is ever enough." For the next hour, I detailed every incident. The engagement dinner seating, the Christmas gift snub, the wedding planning interference. I showed him the 12-page criticism booklet his mother had compiled. Mateo's expression shifted from dismissal to shock. I didn't realize it was this systematic. Why didn't you say something sooner? I did, many times. You said I was being sensitive. That conversation marked the first real boundary I established. I made it clear I would no longer attend family events where I would be treated as an outsider. If your mother wants me present, she needs to treat me with basic respect. The following Sunday, Carmela called to invite us to dinner. I declined politely but firmly. I have prior commitments, but thank you for thinking of me. What commitments could be more important than family? She demanded. My time is valuable, Carmela. I choose how to spend it carefully. There was a stunned silence. For months, I had rearranged my schedule whenever she summoned. This new boundary clearly shocked her. That small act of self-respect triggered something inside me. I began rediscovering parts of myself I had suppressed trying to please Carmela. I resumed my pottery classes that I had abandoned because Carmela had once called them quaint little hobbies. At the veterinary clinic, I proposed a new emergency protocol that streamlined our response time. My colleagues praised the innovation. The clinic director asked me to present it at the regional veterinary conference. I reconnected with friends I had neglected. My friend Lucia remarked, "You seem different, more like your old self. What changed?" I remembered my worth, I answered simply. 3 weeks after setting my first boundary, Mateo and I attended his cousin's birthday. It was my first Rivero family event since our talk. I wore a bright red dress, a color Carmela had once called attention-seeking. Carmela's eyes widened when she saw me. "That's quite a statement," she remarked coldly. "Thank you," I replied with genuine warmth. I've always loved bold colors. When she tried to direct me to a seat at the far end of the table, I smiled politely. "I'll sit with Mateo, thank you." I took a seat right beside my fiancé, ignoring her frown. Throughout the evening, Carmela made several attempts to undermine me. "Valentina, I heard the Torres Veterinary Clinic is struggling financially. Aren't you worried about job security?" In the past, I would have defensively explained our clinic's excellent financial standing. Instead, I replied calmly, "If you're interested in veterinary business models, Carmela, I'd be happy to recommend some fascinating articles." Her tactics no longer worked because I no longer sought her approval. This new dynamic clearly unsettled her. Twice, I caught her whispering with her daughter Luciana while looking in my direction. As weeks passed, my professional life blossomed alongside my newfound confidence. The clinic director called me into his office on a Tuesday morning. "Valentina, Dr. Morales is retiring next month. We'd like you to take over as head veterinary surgeon." The promotion was everything I had worked toward for years. It came with significant responsibility, prestige in the veterinary community, and a substantial salary increase. 15 veterinarians would report to me directly. "This is based entirely on merit," the director emphasized. "Your emergency protocol implementation showed exceptional leadership. The board voted unanimously." That evening, I celebrated with my closest friends. We toasted with expensive champagne at my favorite restaurant. For the first time in months, I felt completely aligned with myself. My work was recognized. My boundaries were established. My confidence was returning. Mateo was genuinely happy for me. "I'm so proud of you, Val. You've worked incredibly hard for this." Only one shadow remained. I hadn't told Carmela about the promotion. The thought of sharing my success with someone who had consistently diminished me was difficult. Yet, keeping it secret felt like hiding out of fear. "You should tell them," Mateo suggested. "My father would actually be impressed. He respects career achievement." 2 days later, we received an embossed invitation. Carmela and Francisco were celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary. The event would be held at the prestigious Madrid Club, where Carmela served on the board. 120 guests were invited, black tie required. The invitation arrived with a handwritten note from Carmela. We expect both of you to attend. Family must present a united front at important occasions. The commanding tone rankled me. Not, we hope you'll join us, but we expect you to attend. The table, her control of who sat where and how people were arranged, remained her primary tool for enforcing hierarchy. Mateo sensed my hesitation. It's a big milestone for them. Everyone who matters to them will be there. Including the daughter you were supposed to marry? I asked, thinking of Belen. Mateo looked surprised. How did you hear about Belen? Your mother mentioned her. Apparently, I'm just the latest woman influencing your weak mind. His face flushed with anger, not at me, but at his mother. She had no right to say that. Belen and I dated briefly in university. It was nothing serious. My mother built it into something it never was. As the anniversary approached, my promotion became official. The clinic held a small ceremony. My parents drove from Valencia to attend. My colleagues presented me with a new white coat embroidered with Dr. Valentina Ortiz, head veterinary surgeon. That same evening, my friend Sophia, who worked at a pharmaceutical company that supplied our clinic, took me to dinner. After our second glass of wine, she became serious. I need to tell you something. I was at La Rosa restaurant last week for a business lunch. Carmela was there with her friend Elena. My stomach tightened. La Rosa was an exclusive restaurant where Carmela often lunched with her social circle. They didn't see me, Sophia continued, but I heard them clearly. They were discussing you and Mateo. Carmela said she was implementing a strategy to make you look unsuitable. She mentioned seating charts specifically, said she was documenting every social faux pas you make. I felt a strange sense of validation. I wasn't imagining the pattern. Carmela's exclusion was deliberate and strategic. The table seating wasn't just rudeness, it was a calculated tool to diminish me. There's more, Sophia said hesitantly. Elena asked about the wedding, and Carmela said, there won't be a wedding if I can help it. Then she mentioned Belen is moving back to Madrid next month. On my drive home, I felt something shift within me. Anger, yes, but also determination. Carmela's anniversary celebration was in 3 weeks. Every important person in her social circle would attend. It would be the perfect place to reclaim my seat at the table. 4 months passed since I had established my first boundary with Carmela. Each day brought new confidence. My promotion to head veterinary surgeon transformed not just my career, but my entire sense of self. I led a team of 15 veterinarians with clarity and vision. The clinic's emergency response times improved by 30% under my new protocol. 3 medical journals requested articles about our methodology. My salary increased by 40%. I purchased a new car, not to impress others, but because I had earned it. At home, Mateo and I reached a new understanding. He stopped dismissing my concerns about his mother. When Carmela called with demands disguised as requests, he began responding, "We'll discuss it and let you know," rather than immediately agreeing. "You've changed," he told me one evening as we shared dinner at our kitchen table, "in the best possible way." "I haven't changed," I corrected him. "I've returned to who I always was." The approaching anniversary celebration for Carmela and Francisco loomed large in our conversations. It would be held in exactly 16 days at the Madrid Club. 120 guests would attend, including former university colleagues, country club members, and extended family. "Are you nervous about seeing my mother?" Mateo asked. I considered the question carefully, not nervous, prepared. I had not yet told Carmela about my promotion. When Matteo mentioned it during a family dinner, she had immediately changed the subject. When his father expressed interest and asked questions, Carmela interrupted with, "Francisco, tell them about your new golf membership." Her dismissal no longer hurt me. I recognized it as the desperate action of someone losing control. The table, who sat where, who was acknowledged, who was centered, remained her weapon of choice. But it was losing its power over me. 2 weeks before the anniversary celebration, I received an unexpected email from Dr. Isabella Fuentes, the director of the prestigious International Veterinary Conference. She had read about our emergency protocol and wanted me to deliver the keynote address at their annual event in Barcelona. This was the highest honor in our field. 3,000 veterinarians from 47 countries would attend. My presentation would be published in the International Veterinary Journal. The professional recognition was beyond anything I had imagined at 29 years old. I immediately called my parents with the news. My mother cried with pride. My father promised to be in the front row for my keynote. My friends organized another celebration dinner. Matteo surprised me with a beautiful leather portfolio embossed with my name and new title. Only Carmela remained unaware of my professional achievements, not because I was hiding them, but because she never asked about my career. In her world, my work was merely a distraction from what she considered my real purpose, fitting into the Rivero family on her terms. 1 week before the anniversary celebration, I accompanied Matteo to his parents' home to deliver our gift, an expensive crystal vase Carmela had subtly mentioned wanting. Francisco greeted us warmly. Carmela offered perfunctory kisses on the cheek. "I've finalized the seating chart for the celebration," she announced as she led us to the living room. "Valentina, you'll be at table 7 with Matteo's cousins from Seville." I glanced at Matteo, who cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mama, Valentina should be at the family table with us. She's going to be your daughter-in-law in 4 months." Carmela's smile tightened. "The family table is already full. Table 7 is very nice. The Gomez family will be there. The father is a judge." I spoke directly but politely. "I appreciate the consideration, Carmela. However, as Matteo's fiancée, I should be seated with him at the family table." Her eyes widened slightly. In the past, I would have silently accepted whatever seat she assigned. "This isn't up for discussion," she said firmly. "The seating arrangements are set." "Then perhaps you should adjust them," I suggested calmly, "unless you're trying to make a statement about where I stand in this family." Francisco looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. "Carmela, surely we can make room at the main table. The girl is right. She should sit with Matteo." "There are protocols for these events, Francisco," she snapped. "You wouldn't understand." Later, as we left, Matteo was unusually quiet. "I'm sorry about my mother," he finally said as we drove home. "She's always controlled who sits where at family gatherings. It's her way of showing who's in favor." "I know," I replied. "The table is her power, but I won't be relegated to the outer circles anymore." 2 days before the anniversary celebration, I received a call from Sophia again. Her voice was urgent. "You need to see something." "Can we meet for coffee immediately?" 30 minutes later, we sat at a small cafe. Sophia pushed her phone across the table. "Elena added me to their ladies' lunch group chat by mistake. I think she meant to add another Sophia. I've been seeing their messages for weeks now." I scrolled through the conversation. My hands trembled as I read message after message from Carmela to her 5 closest friends. The group was named Operation Suitable Match. The messages spanned 6 months, almost the entire duration of my relationship with Matteo. She's completely common. No family connections whatsoever. I've seated her far from the family at every opportunity. She needs to learn her place. Francisco is starting to like her. I need to accelerate the plan. Belen returns next month. I've arranged for her to attend the anniversary. Mateo always had a weakness for her. The seating chart is strategic. Belen at the family table, Valentina with distant relatives. The contrast will be clear. The conspiracy was laid bare. Carmela had been methodically working to undermine me since the beginning. The table seating wasn't just a social slight, it was the visible manifestation of her systematic campaign to push me out and replace her with her chosen daughter-in-law. "There's more," Sophia said quietly. She tapped the screen, showing me photos. Elena shared these from their lunch yesterday. The images showed Carmela and a beautiful woman with honey blonde hair dining at an exclusive restaurant. The caption read, "Lovely lunch with Belen Aguirre. So excited for her return to Madrid. Some men never forget their first love. The perfect match." I forwarded everything to my own phone. Thank you for showing me this. That evening, I showed Mateo the messages and photos. His face darkened with each swipe of the screen. "This is beyond unacceptable," he said, his voice tight with anger. "She's been manipulating everyone, especially me, for months." "The anniversary celebration is in 2 days," I said. "Belen will be there. I'll be seated far from you. Your mother has planned this moment for months." Mateo took my hands. "What do you want to do? We can skip the event entirely." I thought about Carmela's careful orchestration, her strategic table arrangements, her months of planning to humiliate me and elevate Belen. The celebration where 120 people would witness her triumph. "No," I said firmly, "we're going. But I'm done playing by her rules." I called my friend Lucia, a professional event planner. "I need to understand exactly how formal events like this work. Table arrangements, protocols, everything." For the next 2 hours, Lucia explained the intricate details of high society celebrations, how the seating chart reflected the hierarchy of importance, how toasts were sequenced to show respect, how the head table was arranged to showcase family unity. By the time we finished, I understood exactly what Carmela was doing and how to disrupt her careful plans. The night before the celebration, Mateo and I had a final conversation about our approach. "Are you certain about this?" he asked. "It will create a scene." "Your mother has been creating scenes for months," I replied. "The only difference is that tomorrow it won't go according to her script." I laid out my plan. Mateo listened intently, occasionally nodding. "It's direct but fair," he finally said, "and long overdue." "One more thing," I added. "I'd like to bring a gift for your mother." Mateo looked confused. "We already gave them the crystal vase." "This is different," I explained. "Something symbolic." The morning of the anniversary celebration, I dressed carefully in an elegant emerald green gown, another color Carmela had once criticized as too vibrant for my complexion. I styled my hair in a sophisticated updo. My makeup was flawless. As I fastened my grandmother's pearls around my neck, I caught Mateo watching me with admiration. "You look incredible," he said. "Thank you," I replied, feeling perfectly calm. "I'm ready to take my proper seat at the table." The Madrid Club gleamed with elegance as we arrived. Crystal chandeliers reflected in polished marble floors. Fresh flower arrangements stood 6 feet tall at the entrance. A string quartet played softly in the corner. 117 guests mingled throughout the grand ballroom. Mateo squeezed my hand as we entered. Are you sure about this? He whispered. I nodded confidently. Absolutely sure. Carmela stood near the entrance with Francisco, greeting guests in a silver gown that complemented her carefully styled hair. Her pearl necklace was nearly identical to mine. Her smile froze momentarily when she saw us. Matteo, darling, she exclaimed, kissing her cheek. And Valentina, she added with considerably less enthusiasm. Table 7 is by the window. They've already begun seating. I smiled pleasantly. Congratulations on 35 years, Carmela. Quite an achievement. Her eyes narrowed slightly at my calm demeanor. She had expected discomfort or reluctant compliance. My confidence clearly unsettled her. We moved through the crowd, greeting family members and friends. I noticed a beautiful blonde woman at the main table, Belen Aguirre, seated exactly where I should have been. She was arranging her napkin precisely as she chatted with Carmela's sister. The ballroom contained 15 round tables. The main table stood slightly elevated at the front with 16 chairs. Table 7 was indeed by the window, far from the center of activity, filled with distant relatives I had met only once or twice. Matteo, over here, called Luciana, his sister, from the main table. She waved enthusiastically, then looked confused when she saw me accompanying him. I thought Valentina was at table 7. Matteo smiled, but said nothing as we continued circulating. We stopped to speak with his father's brother, then his cousins from Barcelona. All the while, I maintained perfect poise and warm conversation. At precisely 7:30, the event coordinator announced dinner would begin. Please find your assigned tables. Guests moved toward their seats. Carmela took her place at the center of the main table, with Francisco beside her. Matteo's siblings and their spouses sat nearby. Belen was positioned directly across from where Matteo would sit, a perfect conversation distance. Matteo began walking toward the main table. I walked beside him, still holding his hand. Carmela's eyes widened and she realized we were approaching together. She half rose from her seat. Valentina, your table is over there, she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. She pointed toward table 7. There must be a confusion. I smiled warmly. No confusion at all, Carmela. Matteo pulled out the chair next to his assigned seat, the chair where a distant cousin was supposed to sit. My fiancé sits with me, he said firmly. A hush fell over the nearby tables. Carmela's face flushed. The seating arrangements were carefully planned. You're disrupting everything. Actually, I said calmly, I brought you something that might help. I reached into my clutch and removed a small package wrapped in silver paper, a symbolic anniversary gift. Confused but instinctively polite in front of watching guests, Carmela took the package. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a miniature table, an exact replica of their dining room table, where so many family events had taken place. Around it were tiny figures representing family members. "What is this supposed to be?" she asked, her voice tight. "It's your power," I replied, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "The table where you've carefully controlled who sits where for years, where you've seated me far from family at every opportunity." Carmela's face paled. Francisco looked between us in confusion. I continued in the same pleasant tone. "I've been seated at the end of the table, or at another table entirely, at every family gathering since I met Matteo. An engagement dinner, Christmas, family lunches, and now your anniversary. This is hardly the place," Carmela began. "I agree," I interrupted gently. "Public events aren't the place for family politics. Yet here we are, with me assigned to table 7 while Belen sits at the family table." Gasps came from several guests. Belen herself looked mortified, staring down at her plate. I removed my phone from my clutch. I was confused about why you were so determined to keep me away from the family table. Then I discovered this. I handed the phone to Francisco, showing him the Operation Suitable Match group chat. "What is this?" he asked, scrolling through messages with increasing dismay. "Your wife's 6-month campaign to break up Mateo and me," I explained. "A systematic effort to exclude and humiliate me while maneuvering Belen back into Mateo's life." Francisco turned to Carmela. "Is this true?" Carmela's composure cracked. "You don't understand. She's all wrong for him. No connections, no proper family, just a veterinarian with no social standing." The room fell completely silent. 15 tables of guests stared in shock. "Actually," Mateo said into the silence, "Valentina was recently promoted to head veterinary surgeon at her clinic. She's delivering the keynote address at the International Veterinary Conference next month. She leads a team of 15 doctors and has pioneered emergency protocols now being adopted nationwide." I looked directly at Carmela. "I don't need social connections or your approval to be worthy. I've earned everything through hard work and integrity." "How dare you create this scene at my anniversary?" Carmela hissed, trying to regain control. "The scene was already created," I replied calmly. "You planned it meticulously with your seating chart. I'm simply refusing to play my assigned role." Francisco stood suddenly. "Enough, Carmela. This behavior is unconscionable." He turned to me. "Valentina, please sit here at the family table. You are family." Carmela stared at her husband in shock. "Francisco." "No."
Carmela, I've watched you manipulate people with your seating arrangements for years. It stops tonight." Mateo took my hand and led me to 2 empty chairs at the family table, directly opposite Carmela. Belen quietly excused herself and moved to another table, clearly embarrassed to have been part of the scheme. Luciana, Mateo's sister, leaned over to me. "I had no idea what was happening. I'm so sorry." As dinner was served, conversations resumed in hushed tones. Carmela sat rigid with anger and humiliation. Francisco spoke quietly but firmly to her throughout the meal. Several times I caught her shooting venomous glances in my direction. When the time came for toasts, Francisco stood first, as expected. He raised his glass. "To 35 years of marriage, with all its joys and challenges," he looked pointedly at Carmela, "and to growth and change in the years ahead." After dinner, several guests approached me privately. "I've watched how she treated you at gatherings," whispered Elena, Mateo's aunt. "I should have said something sooner." Mateo stayed by my side the entire evening. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "You stood your ground with dignity." 3 weeks later, we received a handwritten note from Francisco. He invited us to Sunday lunch, just the 4 of us. "To begin again," the note read. That lunch was tense but civil. Carmela was subdued, speaking little. When she did address me, she used my name and made eye contact. No warmth, but no active hostility either. She had lost too much face to continue her campaign openly. 6 months after the anniversary confrontation, Mateo and I married in a beautiful ceremony. My parents hosted it in Valencia, neutral territory, away from Carmela's influence. She attended with Francisco, dressed appropriately but not drawing attention. She offered stiff congratulations at the reception. "It may never be warm between us," Mateo acknowledged as we discussed his mother, "but she understands the new boundaries." 1 year after our confrontation, I delivered my keynote address at the International Veterinary Conference. 3,000 colleagues gave me a standing ovation. My emergency protocol had saved hundreds of animal lives nationwide. 2 prestigious clinics had offered me director positions. Mateo and I purchased our first home,
a beautiful property with room for the family we hoped to build. We hosted our housewarming party with friends and relatives from both sides. I arranged the seating myself, a large single table where everyone sat together. No hierarchy, no exclusion. Carmela and Francisco attended briefly. She brought an expensive but impersonal gift. She watched silently as I moved confidently through my home, hosting with ease. I caught her observing me throughout the evening, her expression unreadable. As they prepared to leave, Carmela paused beside me. "You've done well with the house," she said stiffly. "It's tasteful." From her, this qualified as high praise. "Thank you, Carmela," I replied. "You're welcome here any time. There will always be a place for you at our table." She held my gaze for a long moment, understanding the significance of my words. I don't know if Carmela and I will ever have a warm relationship. Some wounds run too deep to fully heal. But I no longer sit at the end of any table, literal or metaphorical. I claimed my place at the center of my own life. I established boundaries that protect my worth. I built success through my own efforts. I created a home where everyone is valued equally. Sometimes standing your ground means being willing to tip over the entire table and build a new one where everyone belongs.